In this lesson, we will be talking about filters, color extensions, path commands, and the 3D box tool. So starting off with filters, Inkscape comes with a large amount of pre-made filter effects that we can find in the filters drop-down menu up here. If you scroll, you can see that each option here comes with subcategories. So you really have any type of effect you can think of. Now, to go through every single one of these would take forever, and you're probably wondering how to tell what every filter looks like. And going through each one would take a lot of trial and effort. Fortunately though, Inkscape comes with an example file showing what these filters look like, and you can use this file as a visual reference. When using Windows, you can find the filters example by going to the Inkscape program folder. So once you're in your programs folder, you will select the Inkscape folder. Then you will select Share, Inkscape. You will then select the folder Examples. And here you will find a large amount of different examples. And the one that we are looking for is filters. So you can select to open that with Inkscape, and you will find this large file with all the different types of filters that we can have with all the different subcategories. All of these examples correspond to the options that we have in this filters menu. We can see a few of them by zooming in, like the blurs, for example, here. You can see how each different type of blur affects an image. So we have the motion blur, horizontal, motion blur vertical, apparition, cross smooth, fancy blur, and so on. And this is very useful because many of these, maybe you couldn't even imagine what they could look like alpha draw, for example. How do we know what alpha draw looks like? What does it even mean? And very easily here we can see the main category, which is image effects transparent, and you can see all the subcategories and zoom in to see what the effect is like. So notice how useful this really is. And you can go through all of these, look at each different one. Here we even have the materials. So for example, leopard fur, iridescent beeswax, eroded metal, cracked lava, lizard skin, metallized paint, and so on. If you have a Mac instead of a Windows, if you have a Mac, you can find this example file by going to your Applications folder, right-clicking on your Inkscape program, and then choose Show Package Content. Then you can open the contents, click on Resources, click on Share, click on Inkscape, and then on Examples. And there you'll find the filters file. So if you want to have full control over what your filter will look like, Inkscape also gives you the possibility to create an effect from scratch with the filters editor. So let's try adding an effect like a drop shadow to an image that I have previously created. So we can close this file. So I previously created this very simple text just to show how we can create our own type of filters. To create a drop shadow, you can create your own style of filter, which we will see shortly, or you can simply use the filters that are already existing. So what you can do is select the image or text that you want to create the filter on, then go to your filters menu, scroll down to shadows and glows, and then select drop shadow. So you can see this little window will appear with a color wheel and all the different HSL modifiers. We can see, if we select live preview, we can see what this will look like. We have a color option, so we can select the shade that we would prefer in this color wheel. And then in the options, we can choose the blur radius, and if it's going to offset horizontally and vertically. So we can make the radius larger, and notice how that changes immediately in our text. And we can then make it smaller just by scrolling on this panel here. And then we can decide to offset it. So move it slightly more to the right, and then move it slightly more to the bottom, like so. And then very easily we can select apply, close our window, and we have our drop shadow very easily made. But let's see how we can create our own filter so that we can also have a deeper understanding of how filters work. So we will select this text to create a different filter, a different style of drop shadow. So all we need to do is go to our filters drop-down menu, scroll down and select filter editor. This will open a dialog where we will be able to manipulate the filter. So notice that we have various sections in this dialog and that they might all be turned off for now. That's because we need to create a new filter. So we will start off by selecting new. We can also rename it drop shadow. And once we have the filter, we can select it because it will be applied to our writing. And then we will add an effect. But before selecting add effect, we need to decide which type of effect we want. The first effect that we'll want is the Gaussian blur. So let's select that one and then select add effect. So notice how that has blurred out our text. But we don't want it to blur like so. So what we will do is take this little triangle that we have here, select it, and drag it all the way to source alpha, because we want the Gaussian blur to be on the source of the text. Next, we will be adding another effect. So let's reopen our effects menu here, scroll to offset because we want this to be slightly to the side as it was in our previous text, and then add effect. And notice how it automatically is connected to our first effect, the Gaussian blur, because obviously the offset will have to be applied to this. So this will give us the options here, how to move it, if we want it more to the right or more to the bottom, for example. And don't worry about making very drastic changes now, because what's great about the filter editor is that you can always go back and change the settings. So lastly, we will add another effect, and it will be the merge effect. So as you can see, there's a little description, merges multiple inputs using normal alpha compositing, equivalent to using several blend primitives in normal mode or several compositive primitives in over mode. So obviously this is very technical, but let's go ahead and select add effect. Now this one we will want to connect differently. We will want to connect it firstly to offset, and then notice that a second little connector has appeared, and we will connect the second one to source graphic, like so. So notice now how we can see that there is a shadow appearing below. So now we can go back to our offset settings, for example, and change these to make it more delicate. So we can move around and select how that will look. And then we can also go to our Gaussian blur and make sure it's connected to source alpha, which it doesn't seem to be. So let's select again and drag it to source alpha. Perfect. So now we know that the blur is based on the source, which is what is going to make it dark. So notice now how we have created a very simple drop shadow, very similar to the one that we already have in the filters. So you can go ahead and make little adjustments as much as you want. And once that has been done, all we need to do is X out of our dialog and we will have our drop shadow. I will zoom in so that you can view it even better. And notice how much more depth this has given to a very simple text. So by doing this, we know that filters can be created from scratch, and we can definitely go through all of these and figure out which ones we like, which ones we don't, or we can use the filters example file that we opened up and go through all of those to see what type of filters we could use. But we also have the possibility to create a filter from scratch. Now that we have seen how to create a filter, we can move on to our color extensions. So there are many ways of adjusting a color of existing art in Inkscape. And if you don't know exactly what you want, but you'd like to experiment with different colors, the color extensions can be useful. So you can find this under the extensions drop-down menu in our drop-down menus here above, and you can scroll down to color. The important thing to know about these is that they make real changes to the colors as opposed to filters that you can turn on and off at any time with just a simple click. If you go through all of these color extensions, some make instant changes without any need for modifying or preview, and those are the ones without the 3 dots at the end of them. So for example, brighter, darker, desaturate, grayscale, all the ones that don't have the following 3 dots. These will make immediate changes. The ones with the 3 dots give you a dialog where you can tweak and adjust the settings. So like black and white, custom, HSL adjust, randomize, and so on. These will open up a dialog where you will be able to modify the settings. So let's select the text that we want to apply this change to. Go back to our extensions, color, and let's select HSL, for example. So this will open up a dialog where we are able to modify the hue, the saturation, and the lightness of our image. Again, even in this dialog, we have the possibility to select live preview so that we can see all the modifications that we are making in real time. So we have the possibility to change the hue. Again, all we need to do is select and drag to change the hue, for example, and notice how that changes. The base color will be the original color that we chose. So every time we click and drag, it will show us the preview of what the color was and what the color has turned into. And once we have decided how we want to change the hue, we can just leave it as so and then select saturation, for example. So we can make it more saturated or less saturated. So notice the more that I move towards the right, the brighter and more intense the color will be. The more I move to the left, the less intense and more dull the color will be, almost reaching shades of gray. So we can move this again and choose our preferred level of saturation, like so. And then also we have lightness. So again, we can click and drag. So more to the right will make the color closer to white and brighter. And if we move it more to the left, it will make it darker and closer to black, as you can see. So again, all we need to do is click and drag and choose the level of lightness that we want. You may notice that we also have possibilities to randomize these different options. So we can choose random hue, random saturation, and random lightness. We also have a help options here that explains how the HSL adjust dialog works. So that is very useful. And once we have decided how to change the color of our image, we can simply select apply and then close. So notice how we are able to change this, but always keep in mind, this isn't like filters. This has actively completely changed the color of our image, and we can't just turn it on and off as we please. This has completely changed the color and it is permanent unless we go in and change it again. It is also possible to reapply the same extension that we created to a different image. So for example, if I select the first text that we have up here where we applied the drop shadow, we can go back to extensions and then select previous extension. And now notice that it has applied the same types of changes to the text above, but the end result is slightly different because the original color was slightly different. It doesn't just copy and paste the color. So notice how useful that is and how interesting the end result is. Now we can move on and talk about path commands. To do so, I have prepared this file with these various options. I have stars and rectangles, just repeated them multiple times, and then another star here at the end, just to show the various effects that the path commands have. So there are some very interesting commands in the paths menu. So we can go to our drop down menus up here and select paths. And it's these options here. We have union, difference, intersection, exclusion, division, cut path. We also have combine and so on. Inset, outset, dynamic offset. And we can see all of these on these options here. Notice that each one has their own shortcut, so Control plus plus, Control plus minus, Control plus star sign, and so on. Each one has its own shortcut. But let's go and see how all of these are different. So let's select both of these shapes at the top, go to our path menu and select union. Notice how that has joined the two objects and created one unique object. And now it is just one object. We can't select the star or the rectangle separately. If we go to the second one here, let's select both objects again, go to our paths menu and select difference. This has literally created a difference between the rectangle and the star. The star has created space in the rectangle. If the star had been below the rectangle, then obviously the result would have been the opposite. Then we can go to our third shape here, go back to our path drop-down menu and select intersection. And this has created a perfect intersection between the rectangle and the star. We can move on, select our fourth group, select the path menu and select exclusion. And notice how that has created a space between the star and the rectangle. Then we can move on to the fifth one, path, select division. And it may seem like it hasn't done anything, but if you click and move, you will see that you're actually able to move the star, the shape. So that is also very interesting. Let's see the sixth one, path drop-down menu and select cut path. And now that has completely cut our shapes, but we can still select them. And then we can try the last one and we can try selecting combine, for example. And it has combined it like so. And again, this has made it a unique object. It isn't separated in various parts. So notice how interesting all of these different options are that we have. The last ones that we want to go and see are again in our path menu, and it is the inset and outset. So if we select inset, notice how it has slightly made the star smaller. I will select it again so that you may be able to see it again. Again, made it slightly smaller. And then if I select outset, it will make it bigger. So this takes the shape and literally brings it inside a certain amount of pixels. And then the other option is dynamic offset that allows us to change the style of offset with this little handle. So we can select and drag. So if we drag towards the bottom, it will make our shape smaller, but notice how it has rounded out the angles. And if I drag it up, I can also make it larger, and again, it rounds out the angles. So this is also very interesting, but let's go back and get our original star shape, like so, select it again. And the last one that we will see is the length offset. So we can, again, select this little handle here, drag, and notice that if we select now the black, it creates a perfect offset of our original shape. So we can make it bigger, for example, or we can make it smaller and hide it, but it creates a perfect offset of our shape. And the more we make it bigger, the more rounded it will be. So notice how interesting that is and how easy it is to create a perfect offset of our image. And it will be separate to our original star. So if we move the star, notice that we have this offset separate. And these are all the options that we have in our path commands drop-down menu. So now that we have seen this, we can talk about the 3D box tool. So I will turn off the visibility of this layer and create a new layer where we can work and just call it layer 1. So the 3D box tool we can find in our tool controls here on the left, and you will see it here with the shortcut letter X. With the 3D box tool, we can create three-dimensional boxes in 1, 2, or 3-point perspective. So we can start by taking our tool and move our cursor somewhere in the center of the canvas, like so. Start clicking and dragging, and without releasing, drag around a bit to see what the different shapes you can create. So notice how we are creating various types of 3D boxes. Release when you have something that resembles this shape. The default mode is a 2-point perspective. So there are 2 vanishing points, which are these at the sides, and the 2 sides of the front faces are parallel and go straight up into infinity. At this point, I can click and drag any of the 2 points to reshape my cube. So just select and drag, and notice that I'm able to create different perspectives like so, and different angles. To draw in a 3-point perspective with 3 vanishing points, I need to click the parallel button for Y to turn it off. And notice now that the 3rd vanishing point has appeared. If I zoom out, I can find it all the way up here. So I can click it and move it down, for example, to make it slightly different, or move it to the side. And this will change the aspect of our cube. So now we're able to move all 3 vanishing points, like so. The values you set up in the tool controls apply to all 3D boxes in the document that you draw, and you'll see changes instantly. So what I've created now, if I go and click and create another box, it follows the same vanishing points, like so. So they're still all connected to the same vanishing points. If I click each box, notice that it's connected to the same ones. To draw with a 1-point perspective, I'm going to turn on the infinite vanishing points for X and Y. So near the X value, I will select this parallel, and also near the Y one, I will select this one. So now we only have 1 movable vanishing point. And I will also change the values. I will set the X angle to 180 degrees, and I will set the Y value to 90 degrees. So now I can move it, and I have a perfectly parallel cube right here. If I move it, I can see the different faces. This gives me a perfectly horizontal and vertical sides. And make sure the parallel button for Z is set to off so I can get another vanishing point like so. Now we can take this vanishing point and drag it right to the center of the cube, so where we have this little cross. So let's select it with our 3D box tool and drag it right to the center and have it toggle to the center. Now if we draw some more cubes, they will all use the same vanishing point, so they look like they belong in the same space. So notice how they all are using the same vanishing point and going in the same direction, like so. Using these values, we can actually create a 3D scene. So let's try. Let's first select all of our cubes in this canvas and delete them. Take our 3D box tool and create a new cube. So let's create a 3D box that covers the whole canvas. So let's select the top corner and then drag it all the way to the bottom, like so. And then we will move the vanishing point at the center of our cube, like so. We can also then select the handles that we have inside our cube to make it deeper And this way, notice that we have created a sort of room, a sort of scene with different walls and a floor. If the cube that you are creating doesn't look like this, but it is flat in the front, that is because it is a closed cube. At the moment, I have an open cube. To make it open, all you need to do is Control select it with your selector tool, select the first cube and delete it. Because a cube is a group of objects, then all you need to do is enter the group and select the object that you want to delete. In this case, it would be the front face. But let's get back our 3D cube tool. And if I click and drag anywhere inside of this room, I can create different cubes, like so. So we can really create different shapes, different scenes inside the cube, and they will all follow the same vanishing point, like so. So you could create really a scene of different objects that almost look like open buildings, like so. If you mess up by drawing a cube in the wrong place, you can move it, but in order to preserve the same perspective, you have to move it with the 3D box tool. And you have to drag from the rotation center in the box. So you need to click from here, and then you can drag it wherever you want. And that way it will maintain the same perspective. So now that we have seen how to create our own filters, the different color extensions, the path commands, and also the 3D box tool, we can end the lesson here. If you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comment box below. And if you want to give our channel some support, you can subscribe and stay updated on all our new courses. Thanks for following along. I will see you in the next video.